when we were exploring retail at Dr. Squatch, we wanted two big asks from retailers. First was a brand block, make it easy for people to find you on the shelf. And the second piece that we were after was off-shelf, a display off aisle, something that's visually disruptive. And so we made this like outdoor shower thing with a tree, and we popped that thing into Walmart a few months after launch, and it just went absolute gangbusters. Like, I don't remember the velocity, but I remember talking with my broker partner at the time. He's like, Martin, I've never seen velocity figures like this in this category. This is insane.
Martin, welcome to the DTC Podcast. We've been trying to get this together for a little while. You reached out on LinkedIn, telling me a little bit about your background with Dr. Squatch. And I think this would be a great opportunity, this podcast, to dive into the right way to think about retail expansion, the right way it plays with D2C. Welcome to the podcast, man. How you doing?
Doing great, Eric. Excited to jam with you. Really grateful to be here. A lot of respect for what you've built out. Just the name for yourself within D2C. So humbled to be part of the mix, and excited to share my thoughts and everything from retail to D2C to whatever pontifications I have on whatever rants I go off on. So grateful for the time.
Well, let's start with your hero's journey that brought you to Dr. Squatch and a little bit about that.
Let's go back to the beginning. So I think where a lot of people have success in consumer is just staying at it for a really long time. And so I have my start in consumer, better part of a decade now, coming up on 10 years. But it was right out of school for me. So I actually started my career at PepsiCo Frito-Lay. So I was, ran a sales territory, was responsible for leading a team of 14 on just, store level execution. And that experience was awesome, really foundational, really learned a ton about how to bring to life a brand, in this case, Frito-Lay, and all the different chip permutations, how to execute that in a retail store. And so that has carried through to my, my experience throughout my career, and I'm really grateful for it. But, I think I found that big CPG, big co experience was just not really my cup of tea. I was craving to build something. I wanted to move up, and I didn't like how things were just purely tenure based. And so that led me on a journey. It actually brought me here to LA, where I'm based today. Worked for a couple brands. One called Halo Top, which was an interesting little journey. Helped them scale their U.S. grocery distribution. I worked for this brand called Genexa, which was a really early stage at the time, really helping them seed their initial distribution into mostly natural grocery. So real brand building expertise. Got the experience from that brand building side all the way up to the rapid hypergrowth kind of scaling side, which was awesome. But that led me to Squatch, and Squatch, I think, is in many ways really been a catalyst for me in this consumer ecosystem, really a way to have just been able to learn so much, and now be in a position to start sharing some of those lessons and approaches. And everyone always asks, oh, how'd you find Squatch? What'd you do? What was different? And I don't have a cool story, unfortunately. I just found it on LinkedIn, like how we found each other, Eric. So all in on the LinkedIn hype train to everybody. If you don't post on LinkedIn, start posting, guys. It's valuable. But just didn't even slide into any DMs, didn't do anything crazy, but just applied. Talked with the founder, Jack. I remember this vividly. I hop on a call and he was like, I got 15 minutes. Like, let's go. And so I got to give my elevator pitch in 15 minutes. And I guess I stood out. And so I get some hustle. And I did some stuff. I put together like an unprompted strategy of, hey, here's how I would kind of attack things. And so,
how big were they at this point?
They were very small, sub 20 million in top line, and I think I was employee number 13. So very, very early stage at Squatch. I'm assuming most of your listeners are going to know who Dr. Squatch is at this point, but when I joined, the only thing that Squatch really had going for it, and I thought this was really cool. I was like, wow, this random YouTube video's got like 20 million views. That's crazy. That was my kind of initial like gut feel for popping on board. And that same YouTube video today is really what fueled a lot of the paid media efficiency, a lot of the growth in on D2C to this, multi-$100 million business, that behemoth that Dr. Squatch is today. So again, immensely grateful for the experience, for the time there. Learned so much. Some of my closest friends came out of Squatch. Nothing but good things to say about that experience and the team that's still there, building in the trenches and scaling them to where they're at. So,
what's your biggest lesson as to why Dr. Squatch has succeeded? Maybe where other big D2C behemoths that have scaled as fast as they did maybe haven't been able to maintain it or haven't been able to maintain expectations. I know at last I see Dr. Squatch was over 100 million in the early 2020s there, like 2020, 2021. So I imagine they've kind of continued to scale. But what do you see as what's your main reason for why you think Dr. Squatch works so well?
There's almost two parts to that, Eric, of why Squatch works so well. I think there's two phases of the business, if you will. There was the D2C-led scaling phase of the business, all D2C, all optimization, essentially through optimization of the paid media channels. I'm not going to speak too much to that because that's just, again, not where I know enough to be dangerous there, but there's definitely some experts that you have here on this group that are a lot more can kind of jam on what went well there. But I think that was the first part, is they built this absolute behemoth of a D2C business. And where I think the second phase of their growth, the second window of why they are now so successful, really breaks down to omnichannel. And I think Dr. Squatch, from the very beginning, from when I joined, was really focused on how do we launch in retail and how do we launch in the most effective, impactful way. And when you look at their business, and again, I don't know exact numbers here, but so this is just a finger to the wind estimate, but based on their distribution and their breadth and just how deep their partnership is with like Walmart and every other major kind of class of trade, I would imagine the split is almost a 50-50 mix between D2C and retail today. And so that's truly why I think the brand has had so much staying power, is they scaled D2C to this pretty much the highest you could possibly get that channel. Like I think they were at several $100 millions in pure D2C revenue before entering retail. And then when they entered retail, just which I can talk a lot about. When they entered the retail, just relentlessly and strategically expanded distribution, and really focused on building a sustainable omnichannel business across the board, because they're in all channels. When you look at like Dr. Squatch's business, they're on D2C, obviously, they're in retail super heavily, they're very big on Amazon. They were big on Amazon through this D2C growth era. They're on TikTok Shop, they're on like everything, and where you can sell the brand, they're doing it. And that's truly where I think a brand has to be today, is an omnichannel brand. So
I want to dive into your specific retail experience at Dr. Squatch, but just talk a little bit about how you see the interplay between D2C and retail for brands at scale.
Yeah, so that's an important distinction. I want to make sure that this is emphasized. For D2C brands at scale, that's critical. For scale is a subjective term, but let's say like when you're really at scale, let's say like 50 million plus, the value of retail, the reason you start like looking at retail, is retail becomes a customer acquisition channel. It's almost a free one. It's like it's not free, but it's revenue generating. So retail serves as this bellwether, if you will, this way for people who've been experiencing your brand on D2C ads through the paid media that you've been sending, that most direct to consumer brands just absolutely pummel consumers with. And where retail comes in, this interplay, is again somebody who's maybe seen let's use Dr. Squatch as an example, seen a Dr. Squatch ad for 10 times, but has never acted on the purchase cycle. They see it on a Walmart Endcap, that purchase cycle, it's already made. It's just like, let me pick it up, let me maybe give it a sniff, and boom, into the cart. It's done. So
especially if it's a category redefiner. Like, I guess this isn't really a category creator because, this kind of product has existed forever, but it is a big category disruptor in that this isn't your father's Dove bar or your mom's Dove bar or whatever, right? Like it stands out.
It definitely does, and that's another important point, Eric, is the concept of category disruption. Let's say, because I was actually talking with a friend of mine. He spent 22 years at P&G. He had the assessment that, bar soap as a form factor it's just dead. No one wants it. No one will use it. It's not going to work. We can't figure it out. So therefore, P&G can't figure it out. We can't figure it out. And it's really funny that it took, this new form factor, in this case, using, again, Dr. Squatch as the example, a natural soap marketed towards men. Those three combinations is what led to category disruption. And fundamentally, it's a great product. I think that's the table stakes for any consumer brand. You gotta have a great product. You've gotta have like something that stands out, that a form factor that's unique. And you have that. You have some virality. You have really good execution. You kind of mix all those ingredients together, and then you have a several $100 million just omnichannel business that is very interesting to see where they'll go from there. So yeah.
So walk us back to your role at Dr. Squatch and, your biggest wins or the strategy that you employed when it came to rapidly scaling up retail for a brand already at scale on D2C.
To be honest, Eric, it took years, like years and years of work in the background, really trying to figure out what's most critical from an execution perspective, what is most important to be able to launch the brand in an impactful way. And for us, that came in a few different ways. So when we were exploring retail at Dr. Squatch, a couple things kind of stuck out. Is we wanted two big asks from retailers, if you will. First was a brand block. We wanted a big, a lot of advisors kind of told us this, you need a space, make it easy for people to find you on the shelf. People aren't going to know. You need to know it's there. Make it easy. Make it simple. So we were asking for 3 feet, 4 feet of space in the Walmart, Target. Talking to all the big dogs on, hey, we want 3 feet to 4 feet of space, and most people laughed at us. You're crazy. Like no, or Target said no, and we want you on .com, and so we're like, no, .com isn't aligned to our strategy. We really need that first piece, and the second piece that we were after was off shelf. So how do you get a display off aisle, essentially? So and something that's visually disruptive. And that was a whole just beast in itself. We had never created a retail display. We had no idea what to put on it or what the display should be. And I remember so vividly sitting in these conversations with our leadership, and we were like, what do we put on this display? And one of our advisors was like, what is most recognizable about your brand is actually not the brand Dr. Squatch. It's your spokesperson, James Schrader. So it's like, put his face on the display. And so that was our first display that we launched with. It was this funny little mock-up of the design guidelines. It was an outdoor shower with James. And so we made this like outdoor shower thing with a tree, and it was like, I can probably find a photo of it somewhere, but this funny display, pretty like light on assortment. And we popped that thing into Walmart a few months after launch, and it just went absolute gangbusters. Like, I don't remember the velocity, but it like, I remember talking with my broker partner at the time. He's like, Martin, I've never seen velocity figures like this in this category. This is insane. And that proved this thesis that off-shelf drives for a viral brand is going to drive impulse, is going to drive volume. And then once you get that impulse, you get that volume, you drive that traffic back to this brand block that you have on shelf. And so again, when we were going through like all evaluation of these retail partners, it took years and years. That's the only person who was really willing to play ball and bought into that strategy and that vision was Walmart. And they bought in this kind of weird spot within the store called the naturals aisle. And so we were like, oh, we should be in bar soap. But the problem with like being in bar soap or being in hair care or being in deodorant is we couldn't get that brand block. We'd be all over the place. Naturals was the only place within Walmart that they let us like, oh yeah, we'll give you a shelf, sure, whatever. And so we did this. We designed this like merchandising unit that it sat on, like this whole crazy operational thing to get the brand executed. And that was, that's how we started. That was the initial launch. We did some other like pilot stuff, shipper tests and things like that I can speak to, but this was the big launch was Walmart, and it was through a lot of really deliberate, really intentional, really thoughtful work about the brand, about where our consumer shops, about how it needs to be merchandised. And again, it was just an amazing culmination of getting to pull from all of these different experiences I'd had to that point to get to leave to have such an impact on that initial launch into retail.
And you took some risks, it sounds like, when it comes to like, especially like that Endcap design, for instance. Like I've never seen an Endcap design that was kind of like that. And so I imagine that pattern disrupt really helped feed the story of the brand, which is a brand disrupt. And so it kind of all led into it. You said that it was light on variations or light on like the actual products that were featured in the Endcap, which we just did a mastermind with Glamnetic, Kevin Gould, founder, and his talk was actually mostly about showing up how he set up his Endcaps in retail.
Wow.
Yeah, a bunch of stuff he showed us about what he's planning and what he's going to do, so we can't share it, actually, his talk. But it was just really the amount of thought that went into how to display the number of variations he had or whatever. So it's interesting that yours, you didn't worry as much about that. Can you speak? You just kind of kept it focused on your hero product?
Yeah, it was like core assortment. I think, let me see if I can find a photo. I'm pretty sure it was bar soap only. So we just did bar soap. Because it's kind of funky with a Walmart end cap. Like you can only really have one price point. They don't like multiple price points, and so I believe it was bar soap only. Here, I literally have the photo. Oh, yep, here it is. Yeah, bar soap. Oh no, I had hair care too. Excuse me. So 2 shelves of hair care, and then 4 shelves of soap, and so 1 soap scent per shelf. And that thing sold out like immediately. And so in the future iterations of end caps that I wasn't super involved in designing, but saw them, the whole end cap is maximized. Like it's all about unit density and maximization. The first one was very much about just like maximizing sell through. And to your point, getting that pattern disruption, that interruption. And I think it really, really stood out for us having never built a retail. It won some award, like some packaging award. They got like a bronze or silver, I don't know, maybe gold, like Endcap design award, and all the other like awardees were like Coca-Cola and P&G and stuff. So punched well above our weight, I think, and how that display actually came together. But to your point, the assortment was just kind of like. We just launched with the full assortment that we had on shelf at the time, which was bar soap and hair care. So it worked. It was a really, really cool experience.
So once Walmart took this chance with you, did this sort of installation that the others wouldn't. You proved out the velocity that you were able to achieve with that. What was your next play to leverage that into relationships with the other big retailers?
Yeah, and so I'll give a lot of credit to the existing Squatch team for like kind of their sequencing of distribution beyond Walmart. I think most of my scope was really, really focused on executing and pioneering that Walmart distribution, that initial launch strategy. So, the team had started to scale up at that point, and we had a lot more folks coming on board to kind of have specialists by each channel. But I can speak broadly to how the brand started thinking about and sequencing distribution from here. But it really just became a game of like, okay, how much can we replicate this existing strategy across all these other retailers? How can we take this existing momentum, pioneer this across every other major class of trade? And so Kroger was an early partner of ours. Kroger launches in a very different way. Again, we didn't have this big impactful brand block, but Kroger was a very early partner. I'll shout out Tom Finnegan, who leads the grocery business over at Squatch. And, he was a great instrumental partner in and scaling that business and getting it to where it is today. But the way Kroger is merchandised is they have all these different categories. So deodorant's on the deodorant aisle, hair care's on the hair care aisle, or soap is on the soap aisle. And so you had the brand kind of living across all these different categories. But Kroger was very supportive and willing to play ball on like some of those features, the displays. And so they were able to get off shelf at a pretty regular occurrence. I've seen on like, this is where I keep track of all my Dr. Squatch retail execution now that I'm no longer with the brand, but on Reddit, which is hilarious, is on the Dr. Squatch Reddit, people take pictures of all the retail display that you see throughout the market. And, it's insane how much soap people will buy. Like I've seen photos of like, people will absolutely clear out, in particular, some of the seasonal scents that Squatch has been doing. Those, to my understanding, has just been a major, major driver for getting off-shelf placement for this category. I think that was a real hill for us to climb, was how do you get off shelf for this category that has pretty stable, kind of like pretty predictable unit velocities and seasonality. And so the way Squatch cracked that code is like, oh, we'll launch a Halloween soap. We'll launch a Christmas soap. We'll launch a Valentine's soap. We'll launch every major season and event and then all their partnerships and stuff that they've spun up. So it allows the brand to activate on this regular cohesive calendar mix. And I'm, again, not taking any credit for this. This is very much what the team has been able to build. But I think it's truly best in class, future case study brand for how to scale omnichannel. And so it's been really, really cool to see the evolution of their business from, Walmart year one doing many tens of millions of dollars to retail now being one of the largest revenue channels of the entire Dr. Squatch business. So it's just, remarkable to see. And it's really cool that I know you've talked to some other ex-Squatch folks. I think you had Dijon on, and so he saw the other side of how the sausage is made, and so it really is a team. It's a lot of respect for guys like that who really kind of optimize things on the growth and the performance side to let me be able to have such a runway to grow into retail. So
I'm really, first of all, I can't believe you didn't say how the squashage. No, that doesn't really work. Sorry, but you mentioned demand generation, and now you brought Dejan on the ad side into it. So I'm just curious, like during that Walmart rollout, you obviously have a product that people are picking up off shelf, which is like the first most important thing that they'll actually pick it up when compared to other products. Maybe you've got your Endcap game, sounds super strong, capturing a lot of attention there. How else did you think about demand generation within the retail environment during that Walmart launch?
Yeah. So I want to be clear on this, guys. Like there is no real playbook for demand generation when you're launching at something of that scale. There was no playbook. So it was very much an iterative kind of figuring it out process. I remember talking to Mike Woolsey, a guy on the was running a lot of the paid media at the time. He was like, Martin, we're running these like awareness ads. We've never done that before. And we're just driving awareness, and the call to action is instead of like, click here to buy your Squatch, now available at Walmart. And so you're doing these awareness campaigns. So I think it's just like the outcome for marketers shifts, and the game when we entered retail shifted away from this game of how do we get as many clicks and conversions and the whole performance ecosystem that I'm not an expert in, but that side of the business, the DTC side of the business, to an awareness game. How do we get as many people aware of the fact that Dr. Squatch is in Walmart on the naturals aisle? And that, I think, was where Squatch had a really strong competitive advantage of already having this at scale D2C infrastructure. And so running an awareness campaign is way cheaper than running a conventional, just conversion focused D2C, buy here, click here to save 20% and buy now, or whatever the call to action is. The call to action of just pumping this into many eyeballs as you possibly can is fundamentally different. I think that's where retail differs a lot, and where I see a lot of new age brands starting to do this extremely well, is in this almost UGC style content of like, a big influencer or somebody in a store, in a Walmart, um, and driving traffic and awareness to the specific aisle that they're on store. And so I think we didn't really do that to an extreme degree early on because, again, there was no playbook for it. But I think a lot of the brands have maybe learned the lessons of Squatch and are figuring out a lot more tactics to be able to drive, to your point, demand generation at shelf, because that's fundamentally where the sausage, the squash is whatever, is made. Eric,
Good try. I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Is made is at is again through driving converting that captive audience to traffic in stores. That's the hard part.
The other thing you mentioned, I think early on, was like the YouTube video that has 20 million or now maybe hundreds of millions of views for Dr. Squatch. And I feel like it's the narrative, right? It's funny when you talk, the narrative, I think, was the co-founder. Maybe he's in the shower or in an outdoor shower or whatever. But then you've got your Endcap that it features this as the hero, right? And it's like, it's sort of like, it's funnel congruency and that power of like the narrative. And it's like, you need those stories about your brand. And it's so cool that you found a way to build them into your Endcap, for instance, and so you get the same benefit from anyone who will have seen that video to what your Endcap looks like, to what your branding looks like. There's like a real through line there that probably helped with momentum. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would say it's this like, it's hard to answer that specifically. I think there was absolutely like this continuity of traction, of engagement with the brand that really kind of helped drive. Again, the brand had virality, and that drove engagement at shelf. And I think that's a pretty easy correlation to say. There's a lot of like complexity and nuance, I feel like, with brand building overall today. So again, it's hard to kind of tease out what was noise, what was just, the right place, right time, all this. But I think there's absolutely some truth to the fact of like, if you have a brand with virality, you have a brand with, I think, virality, but more hard numbers is a metric that I think all brands really need to be tracking, particularly as they enter retail, is awareness. What's your household awareness? Are households aware of your brand? Can they recall your brand? And that, I think, is kind of a key KPI for a lot of marketers. Also should be for sales, but in what let's say the health and scalability potential of a brand. So I think that's just absolutely critical, and want to make that call out.
I just did a podcast with this brand strategist actually on Instagram named Eugene Healy. Huge brand strategy. You should look him up. He's really, really interesting. But he was just referencing a study by Tracksuit, which is a company that purports to be able to really understand your brand impact in market. They did it. Tracksuit and TikTok did this study basically where they showed that how important awareness was and how much better everything works when, say, 4 out of 10 people know you versus 1 out of 10 people. Like how exponentially that grows when you are able to saturate your target audience with the right story. So I think, and this study also showed that clicks were not really a predictor of like brand success necessarily. They were kind of more vanity metrics. It really came down to that awareness. And when you have that awareness, all channels perform better in a way, right? So I feel like Dr. Squatch did, how you've sort of articulated Dr. Squatch's like really deep D2C strategy leading into retail, super amazing. So what I'm curious about is because now you're no longer with Dr. Squatch, but you're consulting with other brands who are looking to replicate this. You were kind of at a unicorn, where you were basically standing on the shoulders of giants a little bit when it came to the awareness that had been built with the D2C platform. What are customers like when they come into you now, to your consulting business now? How do you advise them when they maybe don't have as big of a D2C presence as Squatch did?
Yeah, I think it's a great point and a great distinction. I'll give a quick shout to like kind of what I help brands specialize in. But I think my niche, my bread and butter, really where I like helping brands focus in on is brands who are in this rapid growth, hyper growth, kind of scale up phase. That's the phase I love the most. And so that's kind of who I self-select for and help try to kind of advise for. But I talk to brands of from everyone who's just starting it, like, hey, I have an idea and what do I do, all the way up to, $90 million direct to consumer brands looking to launch nationwide and target. And so, I run the gamut as far as the types of brands I speak with on a weekly basis at this point. And my advice is really like, it's brand specific. So I can't really answer that directly, Eric, of like, how does it differ? But your retail strategy is fundamentally built around the brand. Your retail strategy is fundamentally built around where your consumers shop. And I think that's the real value of direct to consumer, is you can intimately understand your customer and put the product exactly where it is that they want to find the product. And that's the big value. That's where I think a lot of retailers are really seeing the value of D2C, is like, oh God, wow, these guys have some great data on their consumers. We don't have that data. And I think the real value that really any D2C brand is able to bring to any retailer is it's a net new customer. If you're an at-scale D2C brand and you can figure out how to activate your customer and drive them to retail, you're going to have a successful time. And so that's kind of the crux of what I'm helping brands do, is like, how do you put yourself in the right doors, right place, right time, all of this, and how you think through that. And that's been, just an absolute blast, just getting to apply a lot of the lessons and mistakes made at Dr. Squatch to helping brands, the next wave, the next generation of brands, launch and scale in retail. So, nothing but gratitude for such a journey, such a path. But I think that's, my niche is you're a scaling at scale, like just big old brand that's still on D2C and wants to figure out retail. Slide into those LinkedIn DMs. I'm happy to chat.
We'll throw your LinkedIn on there. But what does that process look like? That initial part of determining where, I guess probably a lot of brand owners have a very strong idea where they see their customers wanting to interact with their product. But in a lot of cases, what brand owners think and what the actual customer thinks aren't always the same. So what is your process like for determining which the right doors to knock on the retail game?
This can be like, it doesn't have to be highly scientific. We did it really scientific at Dr. Squatch, but you can do this in a pretty scrappy and quick way. But doing something like putting together an email survey, like, hey, do you want to help? It has to be a good, I'm not the best with survey design, but you can do something like that. There's experts who can kind of help you get, like, let's say the consumer insights, mine your consumer insights for statistically significant results that inform your retail strategy discussion. Again, the time I did this was at Squatch, as we were looking at our consumers compared to the general population of consumers and where our consumers over-indexed in terms of where they shopped. For us, key learning was, it over-indexes towards mass channels, so Walmart, Target, pretty clear opportunity. The brand is a mass brand, and that informed our strategy. I think brands don't have to do that same level of sophistication. You could do something as simple of like an Instagram poll, of like, where would you like to see us shopped? And then you can just kind of like do that. And you do that maybe in multiple different channels. You could do that via email, via Instagram. Like this, again, I'm just kind of spitballing here. But a lot of brands I talk with have a pretty clear idea of where their consumer or where their ideal retailer partner actually is, because you can do all the strategy work until you're blue in the face. But at the end of the day, you got to just go talk to a retailer. And that's really where I think provide a lot of value, is I help facilitate the conversations with my network of broker partners I built out over the years of getting these brands in front of the right retail partners that they want to have the discussions with, and then just having the discussion. Because again, you got to shoot your shot. You don't know if like, I want to be on Target, Ulta, and Sephora. Have you talked with them, or do you have any of the wherewithal to be able to get in front of those buyers? And 99% of the time that I talk to somebody, the answer is no. So I don't know. And that's I think the real challenge for a lot of consumer brands today is like, they're so strong on D2C, or they have this big ecosystem and they just don't know where to start. And so, I try to be just share as much as I can in any intro calls I have with as many brands that I speak with, and just, make introductions. If I can't help them directly, connect them with someone who can. And that's really kind of the take where I've been able to carve out a good niche for myself, Eric, Eric, is just being of value, being of service, being, just doing so to pay it forward and help other brands. That's what I love.
Very cool, man. Well, super interesting. Thanks for sharing. We don't talk a lot about this level of retail expansion on the podcast, so I think there's probably a lot here for people. If you want to get in touch with Martin, we'll throw his LinkedIn link on the podcast right up here. But thanks for coming on the podcast today, man. This is a lot of fun.
Always a pleasure to jam with you. Thanks for the time, and let's have a V2 in some future point. So until then,
I am doing infinite podcasts, so we always have room for
more. Love it.
Cheers,
love
Martin.
it. Well, thanks for the time, Eric. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you're not a subscriber to our newsletter, you can do that right now at directtoconsumer, all one word, .co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.